Deloitte macroeconomist Kay Welsh joins us to unpack the Minister of Finance, Nhlanhla Nene's first mini-budget speech from today. Welcome, Kay.
Thanks.
So what was unique about the economic conditions that Nene was presenting the budget in compared to his predecessors?
I think it's not so much that the conditions are unique. I think we've been in a slow growth or a sluggish growth environment for a while. But I think this mini budget for me was the first budget in a while that's really, I think, facing up to the economic reality with a slow growth environment. So for a number of years now, Treasury has consistently overestimated future growth and had to revise their forecast lower. And in this budget, for the first time, we're seeing much more conservative growth forecasts and a budget that tries to address the burgeoning public debt in that context.
And Nene said in his speech that we need to do more together with less. How is he and government going to curb spending while also trying to promote growth?
I think the key thing there is, obviously with a reduction in government spending, it's reducing stimulus in the economy, so this is a difficult thing to achieve. I think what they mean there is to use the money spent by government more efficiently. So there's a big emphasis on improving, getting back to basics is the word that the terminology they use, in terms of local government service delivery, just doing what you should be doing with the money that Treasury disperses to local governments. And they have a whole range of initiatives they're undertaking to work with different spheres of government to enhance efficiency of spend.
But also trying to promote growth at the same time. How are they aiming to do that?
They also have a couple of, there was a greater emphasis, which was quite encouraging to see, on long-term structural reforms. So the reason that we're in this low growth environment is because of the structural challenges we have in the economy, which are long-term in nature. They're things like poor basic education, they're things like low capacity in government. And they have identified specific initiatives through the medium-term strategic framework that they or targeted outcomes that they want to try and achieve, and it's things like a greater focus on the quality of education through annual assessments, through enhancing, and obviously this is not something Treasury implements, but it's something they allocate funding to.
So his aim really is to try and restore balance to the economy, and what are the key ways that you saw today from your lockup that'll happen?
In terms of balance, it's a shift away. So we've relied heavily in the past on debt-driven consumption-led growth, and what he's really talking about there is a shift towards more investment spending. So that's prioritizing government funds for spending on key infrastructure programs like electricity generation, transport and logistics and the like.
Did they touch on at all on the whole African bank saga recently? Did they touch on those kind of issues?
Yes, so some support will be provided to African Bank. I think what's interesting from this budget is that Treasury have emphasised they can't afford a credit rating downgrade, so they can't afford to increase what is known as their contingent liability. So these are like guarantees that they provide to entities like African Bank or SOEs when they need to recapitalise or inject capital into them. So what they're planning to do is, instead of taking out debt to finance and refinance these entities, they're going to be selling non-strategic assets. So that's how they're going to raise the funds to support the likes of state-owned enterprises.
So where do you think he really succeeded in this mini budget?
I think he succeeded in providing, I think, what analysts and rating agencies will view as a realistic budget. And it's clear that they're going to have to be additional spending cuts, they're going to have to be revenue increases, their tax proposals on the horizon. And I think that will reassure rating agencies and investors that the government is realistic about the environment that it's in.
Okay, and maybe points that he could have touched on that he didn't or needed more attention?
I think possibly there were areas where people are wondering, how, for example, ambitious goals set out in the National Development Plan will now be met in this very fiscally constrained environment. There have also been recent announcements in the media around nuclear procurement, and the MTBS was quite quiet on the NHI. But I think the reality is that none of these ambitious programs can actually realistically be financed within the constraints that we're facing in the next 3 years. So I think the silence was probably, for those reasons, that none of those programs will be financed in the short term.
And how will this budget affect the taxpayer at all going forward?
There are definitely hints that taxes are set to increase, and not much detail has been provided, so they're waiting for further input from the Davis Tax Commission, but there was definitely a hint that the additional taxes will be progressive in nature, which means they'll be aimed at the wealthier South African households or high-income earners. We don't know what that package might look like.
So you came in today with a whole set of expectations, I'm sure. Having listened to the speech, what are your feelings about it? Are your expectations positive or negative over the overall speech?
Overall, I was impressed with the budget. I was encouraged to see government taking action to address a public debt burden that was clearly growing and clearly becoming unsustainable. So from that point of view, I'm encouraged. Obviously, discouraged by the fact that we are in a low growth environment. And I think we need to see, from government as a whole, not just from Treasury, sort of more inspiring policy initiatives to address some of those challenges.
Great. Well, thank you very much for joining us.
Pleasure.